I'm getting ready to install the motor here, and I'm going to finish putting all the accessories on it. There's a lot of cleaning and painting to do. And there's going to be hardships because I'm replacing an older motor with a newer style motor and a smaller one with a bigger one. Right off the bat, I noticed a pulley difference. I'm running the 401 balancer here, and the 343 balancer is quite a bit different. The alignment spacing is quite a bit different. This is 3 bolt holes, this is 4 bolt holes. The depths of the pulleys and the balancers are different. And there's no way I can get this pulley onto this balancer, even if I were to cut the end of it out. It's just too small. So I'm going to try to run this pulley here. Here's a side-by-side look at the pulleys. They're off, but the good news is they're not real far off. The water pump pulleys are different as well. Here's a 401 water pump, and this distance here looks like it's about a 1/4 inch longer than that distance there on that 343 water pump. I have a 401 water pump on the front of this right now. I could probably change it out to a 343. The alternator alignment might be a little bit different as well. And more than likely I'll have to do something with that power steering pump. For now I'm just going to paint these 401 pulleys and put them on. Here's a look at my header gasket on the head. And you can see I did not open up the exhaust ports at all. I didn't want to have a situation where that exhaust gas was running into the header. That's why I bought a non-ceramic coated header. And if you take a look at this header, this gasket actually matches up really good. This is kind of a scary spot right here. Not a whole lot there to seal. Another issue with this header is if I put a straight edge across the thing, it's flush in the 2 end ports. And there's quite a gap on the middle ports. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some weld to this header and have the machine shop surface it so it's nice and flush. Here's a driver's side header. It matches up pretty good too. This one also has an issue with them center ports. I masked off one of my gaskets and trimmed it out, fastened it to the header and then sprayed it. And there's what I got there, alarmingly close. I'm going to be matching these headers to the ports too, and I only have to take out a little bit right here on the middle two pretty much. I tried something new in my aluminum here. I applied this shark hide on all the exposed aluminum, and we'll see how that holds up to the elements. As you may recall, I had that clear coat experiment and got some mixed results with that. Hopefully this does a little bit better. Something else we encountered during the build was, this was the flex plate off that Jeep. You can see it has 3 mounting holes. Well, this flex plate is really weak. You're actually only transmitting the crank energy through these 3 little pieces of sheet metal here. I wasn't able to find a real good flex plate that was drilled for the 3 holes. So I got one that was drilled for 4 holes, and you can see it by the yellow marks here, and re-drilled it for the 3 holes, and you can see that with the black marks. You can see that the weight was removed on this, and some additional weight was removed for that internal balance. This flex plate here had 11.5 inch bolt circle. We weren't able to do that on this flex plate because of this radiused edge. So the bolt circle on this flex plate was dropped down to a 10 3/4 inch bolt circle, and then the converter was bought to match. Here's the flex plate on the Hughes converter, and you can see this bolt's got some clearance in there. This is a factory bolt, and this plate goes on the other side here. I'm going to take some of that up. Here's a look at the flex plate I'm going to use with that bolt in there, and not quite as much room there. It's spaced just a little bit different. I was going to use a Pontiac ARP bolt set, but the head of the bolt is actually a little longer, and as it sits with this flex plate, I'll probably have to have a washer in between the flex plate and the converter. So I have clearance on this bolt head. There's that ring in there with the bolts, and if I put the flex plate on it, you can see it's rocking. There is no play. Here I have 3 washers installed. No rockage, a little bit of play in those bolts. The OD on these washers is a little big where it's starting to get up on this radiused edge, so I'll probably turn that down a little bit on the lathe. Here my washers are trimmed down to about the size of the converter pad. I'm going to start putting this together now and see what happens. We'll put a little bit of Loctite up on them flex plate bolts. Got that plate on the alignment pins. There's the flex plate installed, and now to pinch this rig up onto the trans in the car. I sure hope my starter agrees with this flex plate. Just encountered another problem here, is this mounting point is stepped in on this flex plate. On this one it is not. Here's a look at the bolt in there. It's about the size of that opening. I think what I'll do is I'll face it down some. There's a ridge on the top side of it that really isn't doing anything anyway. Installed the engine 100% solo today. Almost started throwing wrenches. Here we're looking at the torque converter, making sure it's not bound up. And my machine shop guy was worried sick about the clearance between the converter and the flex plate. And you can see there's probably about 3/8 of an inch clearance there. Draws right up to the flex plate. The transmission we're talking about today is a Turbo 400, and this could be different for different transmissions. The instructions say it should be an 1/8 inch minimum to 3/16 inch maximum space between the torque converter against the transmission to the flex plate. That's the gap in there. You can see the gap right there. We're going to push the converter in tight against the flex plate, and now we're going to pull it back to the transmission. That's all the way back. And we need to measure that gap. Here I've loosely placed a nut in between the flex plate and the converter. Fits good and snug, and it's not too tight. I'm going to take that out now and measure it. Measuring with the dialed caliper, I get about 385 thousandths of an inch. We know that 1/8 of an inch is 125 thousandths of an inch. 1 divided by 8, 125. And here's 3/16 of an inch. Here's the measured clearance we have. Doing some subtraction, you can see our window for the shim that we need. My shim thickness will be somewhere between 197 and 260 thousandths of an inch. I'm going to shoot for the middle of this area. So here's what I came up with. Got a couple washers, about the right diameter. 215 thousandths. Puts us right in the sweet zone. Well, I got to talking to the guys at Hughes about my plan to shim the converter back a couple hundred thousandths, and they said, hey, wait a minute, your snout on your converter might not pilot correctly in your crank if you do that, and that has to be checked. And if it's not correct, they'll raise my pads and extend the snout for me. Well, I got enough invested in this where I'm going to take this all back apart, check it, and probably send it back anyway and have them custom tailor this converter to this setup. And we all know what happened here. I don't have the original flex plate on this motor. I can see the snout of the torque converter through this hole in the flex plate. And I think it probably would have piloted, but I'm going to take it apart and check anyway. Here the engine's out. It was pretty easy. It was only the 6 bell housing bolts. Taking a closer look at the crank, that was checked. And compared to the converter, they match. Fits in that pilot pretty good. I measured the step on the crank out of curiosity. It's about 1/2 inch deep. And taking a look at the flex plate, it's stepped back. This step on the original flex plate took up some of that distance. I don't think having this plate in here is helping the situation either. Here I got a straight edge on the converter pads, and pretty tough to gauge the angle on the camera here, but you can see there's not a whole lot of that snout sticking out past the converter pads. So I see what that guy at Hughes was talking about. I have a little bit of grease in the pilot here. I'm going to see if I can get a print on what that snout is doing when it's fully seated up against that flex plate. Looks like it was going in about 1/4 inch, but the flex plate bolts were preventing the pads from completely seating, rubbing the paint off here. Raised converter pads and a longer snout I think will make the situation quite a bit better here. Here's a look at the oil pump out of the Turbo 400 transmission. This side faces the front. I was actually just reading a blog where the guy had his pump gear installed backwards. You can see the notch there, and he lost that much clearance. So he actually did not have enough space, and he had a binding issue. Measuring that tang to the pump cover that it would be riding on, I'm getting almost 1/2 inch. I'm thinking if you're to pull your converter out too much, you would actually risk disengaging and not turning this pump gear, or damaging something from not being engaged enough.